So the federal buyout program has been in the news cycle for the last few weeks, and we've heard a lot about it. In addition, ProPublica just released reporting that saw the current head of the Office of Management and Budget being quoted back in October talking about trying to get people in the federal workforce to stop working by traumatizing them out of the workforce. Which kind of just proves and adds fire to the idea that this cutting of funding, making people return to in-person work, that using emotions and vilifying this work in the media is all in an effort to get people to leave the federal workforce. That while publicly it is being spun as if it's some kind of budget cutting measure or something to reduce the federal deficit, that simply doesn't seem like the case. A lot of reporting has been covering how the GOP and specifically the Trump administration has been promising to try and continue the tax cuts that happened in 2017. These were tax cuts that were for the rich. It was for the billionaires and for very large corporations. When this happened in 2017, it added a $1.9 trillion to the national deficit, and continuing these tax cuts for another decade would add another $4.6 trillion. And it appears that the GOP is turning towards reducing funding or gutting public programs in order to make up this $4.6 trillion price tag. A price tag that is only being made to give more tax cuts to the rich and to really big corporations. While they may be trying to recoup some of this money through the reduction of federal employment and reducing the federal workforce, it is part of the Project 2025 plan, something that they have been following to the letter over the last few weeks, to get rid of 1 million federal positions. But that certainly isn't the only motivator for this move. The DOJ said that some lawyers it fired could not be trusted to carry out Trump's agenda. And many others, as many workers have been taking these deals and have been leaving the workforce, that even if people are suing and going through these lawsuits in order to prevent this happening long term or prevent this from sticking, people leaving their positions does give this administration time to go in there and wreck things or change things or do any number of different options while people aren't working that will still have a very tangible harm on the American people. Although it seems like the ideal possibility is that they get rid of an amount of federal positions and replace the remaining federal positions with political appointees, people who they can trust to carry out their goals, even when their goals are unconstitutional or go against the American people and what these departments are meant for. This has stemmed from this idea that DEI policies, environmental policies, all of these different things that, even though backed up by facts, by our Constitution, and our current legal precedent, are now political. That now when you don't like something, when it doesn't go with your morals, with your religion, or with your political stance, it's now a waste of money. A waste of money that warrants destroying entire agencies and not really putting anything else in to try and recoup this, but just destroying agencies because you don't agree with the facts of what those agencies do. When it comes to what a lot of Democrats call wasteful spending, this being things like police and the military, it largely also comes with an acknowledgement of what should be funded in its stead. When it came to defunding the police, in its stead it was advocated that there should be better social services, that there should be alternative ways to handle when people are in distress. That yes, there will be funding removed from this thing, but that it will be put back in to address the same problem, addressed in a way that facts and studies agree with are effective to address that same issue. And that is simply not what this is. Gutting the EPA means that there's nothing regulating whether or not your water is clean or your air is safe to breathe. Gutting the FDA means it's a gamble on whether or not your kid's food is safe to eat, whether or not your drugs could kill you or give you unknown side effects. And they're not proposing funding something else instead. They are only proposing gutting these different things. They are trying to make the facts political. It's something that we've been seeing for years now. The most obvious one is when it comes to climate change. No matter how many data sets and research you present, people are convinced that it is a political issue over a factual issue. And now we're seeing it when it comes to identities. These claims that DEI and that being inclusive is now a political issue. That your identity, although yes, our identities have always been political, but now whether or not it's protected by law is again a political issue. We're backsliding to 30 years ago. We're backsliding to all these fights that we've already hashed out. Well, the defunding of USAID and the very likely loss that we are to see in human life and human health is tragic. We're also seeing this idea that facts can be determined by whoever is in charge politically. And I feel like that's something that's not fully being addressed. If whoever's in charge doesn't like what all of the numbers say works, what is needed to protect people, then that gets to be gutted. Now, the reason why this potential constitutional crisis is an issue is because we have all of these safeguards in place to protect vulnerable people and to protect our rights, so that someone cannot just come in and slash those at the knees. That you have to go through these hoops and these different things, that there are checks and balances from taking away protections from people. That it's not just bad because, oh, it's violating our Constitution. It's bad because it's going after people's fundamental protections. They aren't trying to reduce the national deficit. They're trying to reduce protections for everyday Americans. And they are stepping over anyone who might try and stop them. Whether it be the employees that regularly carry out these actions, then they will fire them or pay them off or humiliate them in the press until they're out of there. If it's the courts, then they're going to start saying that, you know what, no, we're just not going to listen to you. We're just not going to listen to what you have to say. And if it's Congress, then we're going to turn the American people against you and incite a riot. This is not okay, not because it goes against what usually happens, not because it goes against the norms, not because it goes against the Constitution, but because it goes against the American people. That it goes to stripping us of the rights and protections that are in place for us. That is what makes this not okay. Wasteful government spending is a valid concern. We have a national deficit. We continue to pour money into things that don't always see much of a return. But the biggest thing that we're not seeing a return on is these tax breaks to the ultra wealthy. While the ultra wealthy have been putting more money into their pockets, the American consumer has only been seeing increased prices and wages that aren't keeping up. That was with, in 2017, Trump putting in place this tax cut, this very same tax cut that they're looking to continue. Already created $1.9 trillion that could have gone somewhere else. $1.9 trillion that could have gone towards the things that the American people value a lot more: Social Security, healthcare, social services. Another $4.6 trillion that, if put into the American people, can see a lot more of a return than what we have clearly seen has not worked when you put it into the pockets of the ultra wealthy. If you're worried about keeping American competition and keeping these companies with competition, continuing funneling money only to the very top does not improve innovation, does not give a chance for something new and up and coming to innovate and overtake them. It gives them more power to stamp those things out. Because ultimately that is not the goal. The goal is not budget cutting measures. The goal is not to reduce the national deficit. The goal is not to help the American people.